It's Tuesday. It's the first Tuesday of the month. And that means, with a stunning originality, it's First Tuesday Talk. We really need a better name, but it'll do. Particularly, we called FTT, and I always get it entirely wrong. I call it First Talk Tuesday, which makes no sense whatsoever. It's First Tuesday Talk, School of Humankind's beginning of the month get together where we will take a topic and we'll bat it around a little bit. We'll see where we agree, we'll see where we disagree. We will, I hope, provoke each other a little bit into seeing things slightly differently. Part of our larger mission, which is not to create, everybody agreeing with each other in lovely little safe echo chambers, but to have real conversations. There's usually not major disagreements, but sometimes there are disagreements, and that's super cool. We're all intelligent people who come in with a view to make the world a better place. And if we don't agree always on the best way to do that or the approaches to do that, super cool. That's the way the world is. So this is our conversation, 45 minutes. We have a basic structure, 2.5 minutes each to talk about the topic that is assigned, and then a further 2.5 minutes each to respond to what other people have said. And then we open it up to conversation for anyone else who's in the room. And the topic this week, forgive me if I get it slightly wrong, this month, the topic is the stories we tell ourselves. Is that the right? Have I got that right? Yeah, is that the right? I was been thinking of it as the stories we live by, but it's not the stories we live by, it's the stories we tell ourselves, although maybe that's the same thing. So let's go round and have a first round of who thinks what about what. And no pressure, Vreni, but as you were the person who suggested this topic a couple of months ago, you get to go first. There you go.
Thank you, John. Yes, I suggested this topic and I was sitting down to prepare it. And when I suggested the topic, I had a particular story in mind that has been running the show for me in my life for quite a while. And it's been the perfect mother myth story, or this story around what a good mother is or has to be, should feel like, should look like, should do, how she should act. And when I suggested that topic, I had this story in mind, but when I was sitting down, I was first looking at what am I actually talking about when I say like the stories we tell ourselves. Because when I first started reflecting on those things, I was not aware that I was telling myself a story. I thought that this is just how things are. And have to try better or I have to do better. And it took me a while to just realize that this is a story that's made up from my beliefs and that is my truth. And I started working on my beliefs and my truths and my past, where I picked up this story and I was dragging it along, and it was quite heavy to drag along. And came to a point where I saw it as part of my stories, my beliefs, but then also realized that there is social stories and social narratives. And started wondering, and this is kind of a question for you also, like, how do I find the truth then? And I went into this particular story and unpacked it for my story, and always bumped into the social story then, that when I found an element that I was like, okay, this is not helpful for me, this is not creating the life I want, and I want to let it go. And I bumped into the social part of the story that told me, but this is how it has to be. And I find this very challenging when we talk about the stories we tell ourselves, than to really kind of go and come to a truth, because stories there are.
Wow.
Oh God, we're in the Oscars. I can't believe it.
I
You're getting
remember. I did. First time.
beautiful. Thank you, Vreni. Sorry, the orchestra was so rude as to push you off the stage. Um, let's see, Amanda, what's your opening remarks?
Stories we tell ourselves. I actually have been dealing with my own recently about my own health and fitness, that I'm self-sabotaging myself all the time, of stories I've told myself from childhood, that because I had a bigger body, I would never be skinny, or I could never run and I could never do these things because that's what I was told. So I believed them, right? From childhood, friends, family. So I believed it. So then I was keep telling myself these stories over and over and over again, believing never to be true. So then when I actually do start pivoting and changing into a direction I wanted to go in, I would automatically feel uncomfortable and my body would go in fight or flight mode, thinking, this is not right. This is not comfortable. So then I would start self sabotaging myself. And I'd go back to what I know is normal, what I know is true to me. But it's not really true to me. It's my own belief system that I ingrained from family members or society growing up when I was a kid. So I'm working through that right now. And I'm actually becoming a runner by doing the consistency, showing up. And how do you do that? You sign up for something so that it's like an end goal. So I signed up for a half marathon. So I'm putting in the reps and I'm doing the things
Mhm.
to become that person. So I have to show up. I am being that person. So I'm rewriting my story. I don't have to be that person. And the thing is when I think half marathon runner, I kept thinking of like a skin and bones person, like they're super tiny and I want to be muscular. So I'm like, well, this is the person I want to look like, but I can't run. But this woman that's doing the running club in Swift Current has the body that I want, and she is a marathon runner. She goes to Boston and does marathons. I'm like, so she's proof that my story that I was telling myself is not even true. So we have to keep digging deep inside of us, and it's like, what's my story? What's my truth? What do I really want? And then start creating our dreams and desires from that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Anna, who I believe you're still down in Mexico, is that right?
I am actually,
Wow.
yes. I'm only here for a couple of more weeks, so I'm starting to have like anticipatory grief. But
Okay, well,
also getting the chance to milk it. So
yeah,
it's kind
go
of
on. Milk it all you can. Tell us, give us your perspective from down south of the border.
yeah, so I love this topic. I actually feel like it's been coming up a lot lately. I don't know if it's one of those things where because this topic was introduced, I'm hearing it come up in conversation all the time, or I'm not sure which came first. But I've been sitting with it a lot because I think it's something that we just do, and we've been doing since we can remember, since we can talk and start forming ideas. But I think it's become especially poignant now as I'm aging. I think it really started when I hit official midlife. And officially, they say midlife is at 45. And I remember learning that in nursing school. And then, they have the categories, right? There's midlife. And then there's like elder, what was it? What are they? Senior, most senior, oldest. Like there's all these categories, right? Because we're all living so long. And so I think it's like 80 and above is its own category, right? So it kind of put things in perspective for me, thinking like, okay, what does this mean to be in a different stage of life? What does it mean to age? Are there age appropriate things? What should I be doing? And so I'm like trying to kind of, like Vreni was saying, like trying to figure out what is my story and what is society's story. And I think for most of my life, I've kind of just lived my own story. But then once I hit midlife, it was like, wait a second, I started buying into all of society's stories. I think because I think as women in midlife, we don't have a whole lot of role models, or at least not until recently. I think things are really changing, which is absolutely fantastic. And so it's like we're kind of left to figure out what is our story? What does this next stage of life mean? What does the rest of our life mean? And so I've been kind of trying new things to see how I can challenge myself, to see like if I can rewrite this story of aging, if I can rewrite what it means to be a woman who is in midlife and who's going to continue to get older. I mean, it's never going to stop, right? So we get to continue to rewrite our stories. So I think I actually just started surfing lessons. Since I'm in Mexico, like, milking as much as I can. I'm like, you know what? I'm here. My body still works. Let me try something. And I was like afraid of the ocean. And I said, am I afraid of the ocean? Let me rewrite that story. So that was one of the reasons. So rewrite that story of being afraid of the ocean and being too old to start new things.
Brilliant. Wonderful. I love that. Now, from south of the border, but now currently slightly north of the border, Gaby, tell us what you're seeing and hear or thinking about this.
For me, what's been showing up in my life when I think about the stories I tell myself is redefining. So, okay, let me back up. I feel like as a millennial, which Anna, what you said really like stood out to me because I feel like as a millennial, I've grown up part of my life seeing things on TV, but not really social media. And then at some point, social media became a huge thing in our lives. And then this whole idea of how people show their lives on there and what reality is. And I think for a long time, I wanted my life to be the story I was telling myself. So it wasn't either enough or I wasn't doing enough, or some people were doing more and I needed to do more or I needed to do less. There was always like this ongoing narrative in my mind and maybe some comparison just because of how life works, I guess. And just really always having something to measure up to. So the story I tell myself always has challenged that side of me. And I think recently, as I'm getting into a different chapter in my life, I'm starting to realize like life can't just be like what it is right now. It doesn't have to be anything different. I don't have to change anything about it. I don't have to do more if I don't feel like doing more, or I don't have to, prove myself. Like there's a lot of things that I'm having to challenge. And those stories that I kind of get caught up on some days about well, I'm in my 30s now. I should be doing this. Or look at all these 20-year-olds doing all this kinds of stuff and I'm not, and just really cutting that and saying, it doesn't matter. Like this is my life. This is what I want it to be. And when I sit down and think about it, I'm very happy with the way that it is. It's not perfect, but I'm happy with the way that it is. It's just challenging, chaotic, messy, and it's okay. It's just what it is. That's my take on that.
Beautiful. Lovely. Wonderful. Thank you. And then I'll go, but already there's so many things being said that I want to respond to, but I'll stick to my own track for a moment. So yeah, the stories that we tell, and it's something I think we all understand, that we live by stories, and the stories we live by help define who we are in our lives, and we love our stories and so on. But they're really complicated. They became really complicated for me about 7, 8 years ago when all sorts of things happened. My life collapsed in all sorts of ways. I had a heart attack. I had a breakdown. I had a burnout. The pandemic wiped out my career, which was traveling around the world training actors and being a performer. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. And I had a kind of really big realization. I actually remember the moment it happened. It was 5 o'clock in the morning when I was lying in hospital 4 days after a heart attack. It was a summer's day and there was a bird singing on the tree outside the hospital. I was by the window. I could see the bird singing. And I went, this is actually what matters to me. Not the fact that day I was meant to be getting on a plane to go and run a residency in Greece, and then I was off to India or something. I can't even remember now. This is what matters to me. And the story I've been telling myself of getting on and off planes and trying to achieve success and so on is a false story. Now, you know, I spend my life trying to encourage people to be aware, and as a performer, it's about authenticity and truth and so on. How could I be living for decade after decade by a story that I didn't actually believe in? And it made me realize that behind the story, there's what a friend of mine calls the lens, or what in my work in Self with Others I call the paradigm. It's the type of story we tell ourselves, the genre of novel we are reading or telling ourselves about our lives, the way we see the world. And, you know, you might be an optimist, you might be a pessimist, it might be abundance, it might be scarcity, it might be whatever. And I realized at that point that all the stories I told myself, all of them were told through the lens of anxiety and the fear of not belonging. And I can trace that back, but it doesn't matter. Change the lens, and you change the story. But change the story without changing the lens, and you find you're in the middle of the same story again. That was my take on it. So, what a rich set of inputs. Got masses to take to pieces. We'll go around in the same order. Feel free to respond to either develop your own thoughts further or respond to anything else that you've heard. Vreni, what are you thinking?
I'm still thinking, and I think like our structure needs a pause, a thinking pause after first round. There is so much I loved in this round, and the last bit, John, you said, I love to sit and think about this for a while when you talked about the lens and the type of story. And I'm not quick enough to apply it to my thoughts that I could not finish before. I'll have to sit with it. What I loved about what Anna said is that she realized that those categories, and those categories also are just stories, you know, like that we're now entering midlife. Like, who defined this, and what does it even mean, and why should we believe in it? And you know, sometimes I have to really calculate how old I am. I'm like, somebody's asking me, and I'm like, wait a minute, I have to do the math. So why should then I live by those stories that tell me that by 45 I am in midlife now and I have to behave differently? So I found this very interesting, and I love that you're challenging those social or cultural stories. And another very interesting thing Amanda said, that when you start challenging your stories, you've already seen them, and then you start challenging, and then you get this bodily response, like you feel uncomfortable, like your body goes into, this is dangerous, like you should not do this. And then working on this level first so that you can become able to change something. And this is where I could not finish my thought. I think it ties together with what John said about changing the lens. Like, you need to change the lens in order to not jump back into the old story because you're afraid, because there is this fear of not belonging or whatever it is underneath. Yes, there's a lot of nice things I wrote down from Gaby as well. Yes, this thing of always having to measure up to something, you know, like it, for me it felt a little bit like being driven, but towards what, you know, but for whom?
Beautiful. Thank you. Amanda, what are you thinking?
John, I loved yours. It was the pivotal moment of being present in yourself and you realizing that is powerful. And I think that's where you will actually find your truth of your own story, is when you actually stop and be present in yourself and you listen to, is that true, or is that something I learned and that I took on as my own truth, which could be a generational truth from like the money thing, right? The money thing is a fantastic one. That's another one that's in my belief system, is money is hard to come by. It's, like the scarcity mindset that was generation to generation. And I'm like, is that really true? Like, it's not. I'm going to rewrite my own story. So I love just being present in the moment and listening to what's actually true to you, because that's what I've been doing lately. And even you said too, it's a lesson. These things, like, devastations happen. It'll keep showing up in your life in different forms until you learn your lesson and you can make that choice, that conscious decision to make a change, because then it won't show up again. And that just happened to me again just recently. But it came to me like this, because I was stopping and I was reflecting on it, journaling about it, and it just showed up in my life. I'm like, oh wow, it showed up in a different person, but it came in again and again and again. And until I stop and I listen, pivot, and then I can move to the direction I want to go. Because that's not my story anymore. That's not the direction I want to go. So I found that very powerful. And same with the age thing, Anna. The age thing. Age is, like, to me, age is just a number. It's just a number. Like, it's how you act and you feel. Because there's people that I remember thinking in 60s, they were old. I have friends that are in their 60s that look phenomenal, and they're running and chasing after their grandkids. You would never know they were that age. Whereas when I was younger, 60 was old, and they were old grandmas wearing kitty sweaters. Like, age is just a number. And I do know 60-year-olds that do act that age, and I have 60-year-olds that are younger. So I always tell people, age is just a number. It's what you make of it, and it's what you want. I know I'm going to be that 60-year-old that's hiking and rolling it, having the best time of my life. So that was great.
I want to be there watching you, Amanda. I want to be there watching you. Beautiful. Thank you. Anna.
This is so great. I just wanted to say this is my first Tuesday talk, and I love it. There's just so much insight and so inspirational. I could say something about everything, but I just kind of wanted to ride on the coattails of Amanda, because I can really relate to your story. I was that kid who never got picked for any of the teams. I failed all of my PE tests, when they were like, you got to run a mile and you got to lift this and you got to do this many pull-ups or whatever, or do the, hang for your chin-ups, all those. I failed them all. Like, I think, and that's the funny thing, is I was a good student, but PE, I would always get the lowest score, because I thought that I was physically unfit. So I just kind of grew up that way. And so when I hit high school, college, I didn't play any sports, because I was like, well, I'm just not a sports person. I'm not an athlete. That was a story I told myself. But really what I discovered later in life it's just that I did not excel in those types of things. And I found this out by lucky accident. I decided one day to enroll in a martial arts class. I was living in South Korea at the time, and and I'm half Korean, and growing up, I had always heard, like, hey, you're half Korean, do you do Taekwondo? I'm like, no, because I'm thinking I'm bad at sports. So when I was finally in Korea and I decided to enroll in a Taekwondo class, I just, like, that first day was so inspirational. They're like, do this, and I did it. And they're like, do this, and I did it. And I was like, oh, I love this. And I started going every single day, and eventually I ended up getting my black belt. And I was like, wait, okay, so it's not that I'm physically unfit. It's not that I'm not an athlete. It's just that I hadn't found something that what resonated with me. And then when I found that, suddenly I rewrote my story. I'm like, wait, I am athletic. Wait a second, I can do this. And then I started doing jujitsu, and I started doing all this other active stuff. Now I'm surfing, and this is something that required me to step out of my comfort zone. And I think that's really what it comes down to. It's just like, the way to rewrite your story is by, happening upon it by accident, or deciding that you're going to take that step to try something new and take yourself out of your comfort zone. And then you can completely rewrite your story that way. So I'd love to say more, but I see the time is at, I don't want to get interrupted by the orchestras.
No, it's so embarrassing to be orchestrated off the stage. Wonderful. Thank you, Anna. Gaby?
I really enjoy what I'm hearing, because as I'm hearing everybody talk, I'm thinking about that liberating moment where you challenge your story and then you realize, wait, that's not who I am. And it's this like uncomfortable peeling of this layer of the old you. And whatever got you there for whatever reason. And it might have been helpful, but now you get to see this new, beautiful side of who you are. And you start to discover new things about yourself. And I think like that's possibly my favorite part of being able to challenge those stories and figuring out, wait, that's actually not me, or wait, I do have the skills. I am capable of doing that. Um, because I'm a little bit of the same way when it comes to like the athletic. Like I say that I don't enjoy it, and I say that I don't want to do it, but then I'm out there. I like running, I like boxing, I like doing the things, I like yoga, I like having that moment for myself to challenge myself. But
Mm.
yet sometimes I catch myself saying, "Oh, I'm not athletic. Like I like to just read a book, stay inside, avoid social interaction." And then I think back and I'm like, actually, I don't like, yes, that's a part of me, but then there's this other side of me that also enjoys those things. And it's having to rescript that story and think about it in a different way, which makes me think about myself in a different way. Oh, okay, I'm more than just what I've told myself. I have all this other sides of me and parts of me that are interesting and different and beautiful and weird and whatever. So I think that's like my favorite part of this conversation, being able to say, yeah, there's actually so much more to me than, you know. Um, and I did wanted to touch on the what John said about what is the theme of the story you tell yourself. I think that's such a like interesting take, and that's like a journaling prompt or like a take it to your therapist conversation. Like, what is the theme of my story, and am I okay with that, and do I want to change it? I think you take some control back and ownership and that storytelling that's going on either way, whether we want it or not. So thank you for saying that, John. That was, I
Mm.
like that. I wrote it down.
Beautiful. Thank you, Gabby.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, so much, so much, so much. I want to just pick out a couple of bits and then we'll enter into a general conversation. But a couple of bits. Gabby, you talk about that notion of comparison with others, that feeling that somehow we should live a story that somehow equates to other people's story. And you also touch on that, Vreni, when you talk about social stories. And Anna, you also touch on that when you talk about, age-specific stories. It's really interesting to real, Vreni was saying people just go, that's the way things are. Nothing is just the way things are. Nothing. Everything is a choice. You either do things the way other people do them or you choose not to. Now, I'm not saying you should choose not to. I'm not saying, screw what everyone else thinks. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying if you choose to conform to the stories that other people expect of you, or if you choose to conform to the stories you have learned to tell yourself, you are buying something by that choice. What was the choice to remain anxious buying me? Because I'm not stupid. I wasn't doing, going, well, I just want to be anxious for the rest of my life. My anxiety was buying me something. And as I look at it, I go, well, what was it buying me? It was buying me the illusion of safety. Because I went through an experience at school where I was bullied very badly at a boarding school for a number of years. I learned that the world was a dangerous place. Anxiety made me hypervigilant. Hypervigilance made me feel safe. Therefore, my anxious worldview was a way to make myself feel safe. You're not wrong for following a unhelpful story, but it's really helpful to say to yourself, what am I buying by the choice to conform? What am I buying by comparing myself to others? And do I want to pay that price, or is there another way to achieve what I want? I want to feel like I belong. I want to feel like I'm safe. Maybe there are other ways to do it than being anxious. Now, one more thing, just I love, Anna, you're saying age specific. I am 60 as of last year, and I love the fact that it gives me permission not to be young anymore. It's fantastic to just go, I don't have to do, there's young people who can do that stuff. I don't have to do that shit anymore. I want to be somebody who is a little slower. I'm growing some veggies, all of that. So that age-specific thing is also a permission as well as a straitjacket. Oh, so many things, so many things. Um, let's just open it up to general conversation, including for anybody who's in the room who wants to contribute. Feel free to just, you know, stick a thought in or stick an oar in. You're very welcome. There's so many things in there. I could talk endlessly, but I'm going to shut up for a minute. Who else wants to respond or pick up on something?
You know what's funny is I actually had served this lady. She was 65 and she said, "Do you know what the best part?" She's like, "This is my favorite era." I'm like, "Why?" She's like, "Because I can do whatever I want and not give a shit about what anybody thinks."
Yeah.
And I sat back with that. I'm like, "Why are you waiting till you're 65 to do that?"
It goes so much to some of the things Gabby was saying as the youngest person in the room, growing up with that millennial thing of we living in this straitjacket of social media that tells you exactly how you should be doing things. All this crap about fear of missing out. Of course, you're going to spend your life missing out on everything. You can't do everything. And somehow, so we sit in that amazing place of going, I don't even have permission to live my own life. I love your 65-year-old going, tell you what, sod it. I don't care anymore.
I'm going to pipe in here. I love the discussion. You guys are all amazing. But one point I and you guys all touched on it, but it's kind of like there's so many iterations of whatever story there is in the world. Like Amanda, you've had this marathon runners look a certain way, and then the lady running the club looks the way you want to look. So there's a new story there. So it's kind of like with all of the iterations of stories we can choose, why don't we choose ones that drive us where we want to go instead of the ones that continually hold us back? And why do we choose the ones that hold us back? It's, we tend to do that. We tend to want to keep ourselves safe. And that's kind of the fight or flight brain always keeping us safe when we should really choose the stories that fuel us towards what we want and be okay with it. Be okay. There's so many parts of that, being okay with failure, being okay with looking different than everyone else. There's just, choose the story that actually helps you.
I think this is very easily said, isn't it?
Yeah, not easily done.
Because the last thing John said, I was writing down before he started talking about this, I was writing down what's the benefit of my story. So I came to the point where I had to be really honest with myself that like every story, even though I see it as like making me being stuck or like, what did you say, Angela? Like it does not let me move forward. There's a benefit there for me. And Gabby was saying, like that when you recognize those stories and you let them go, it's very liberating. I had those moments, but I had also other moments where I had to be really honest, and it was really painful to see that I was getting some benefit from this story, and I was getting a benefit from justifying why I could not move forward. And then, how should I say this? Like just being honest with yourself about this, it feels really shitty. So this is really painful to see that, like that you're somehow, could you say, like you're cheating on yourself in a way, like you tell yourself a story in order to justify a benefit that you get from something you say you don't want. I don't know if I can.
It's kind of the self-sabotaging that Amanda was talking about.
Yes, but then you go and you look at another layer and you say, okay, why am I self-sabotaging? What do I get from staying stuck?
What sort of self am I? What is myself? Am I lying to myself about who I actually am? It goes right down to that level. I think, Gabby, you put your hand up there. I don't know if that was deliberate, but
You can finish your thought. Finish your
No, no,
thought.
go, no, go, 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 go.
Well, what I'm just really thinking is how the brain is such a beautiful thing, but it also gives us so much just challenges. I think part of the reason why we create stories is so that we make sense of what's happening around us. And I think sometimes we create stories that helps us survive, like John was saying. Sometimes we create stories that have a true benefit to our survival and our well-being. And then there comes a point in time where that story no longer serves us. And I think kind of going back to what you're talking about, Vreni, is having the courage to identify, oh shit, I've been playing the victim role, or I've been really just having people rescue me as I, engage in the world, or really just having to take that ownership and accountability and looking at those stories and saying, are they helping me? And that is a painful, vulnerable place to be because then you have to face that and then you have to figure out what's going to work next and what does that mean for me and how do I engage with the world if I'm not this, then kind of like what John was saying, then what am I? Who am I? How do I
Mm.
approach this? So I think there's like a vulnerable aspect to all of this. It's beautiful and it's great, but I think there's a painful and other side too. But this story also has kept me safe. If I believe that
Yeah.
the world is not safe and I keep myself here, I'm okay. If
Mm.
I get out of this comfort zone, that's terrifying.
Yeah. I think there's something for me so powerful there, Gabby, in terms of how we approach the changing of the stories. Because as you say, saying it is easy and the process of doing it is significantly harder. That if we, if I lie in the hospital bed, having had a heart attack and seen my life collapse, and go, I'm an idiot, I'm a fool, I hate myself for what I've done. I've just created all sorts of problems, unnecessary problems. And yet it's always easier to say than to do. If I can go, those stories, I am so incredibly grateful for how safe they've kept me. And I am so pleased that I was smart enough to find ways of interacting with the world that kept me safe when the world was dangerous to me. In reality or in perception, it doesn't matter. Danger is danger. I am so grateful that I did that. Now I can leave them behind. I often talk about it as your grandmother's voice. Your grandmother's smart. She knows stuff. You listen to her, but you don't believe what she says because she's talking out of a world that's 40 years out of date. So you don't disrespect her. You don't say, shut up, you silly old bat. You go, I hear you and I look for the truth in what you're saying and I honor you and I'm grateful to you because I wouldn't even be here without you, Grandma. But the world I live in now is not the world that you lived in when you created these stories about how to live. So I'm grateful, I listen, I respect, but I do not believe the stories that I am telling because they come from a time that no longer exists. It's called the past, whereas we live now in this moment.
I think that the last thing you said, like we live now in this moment, is kind of key to dismantle all those stories. It's
Mm.
something that Gabby touched on in the beginning when she said I was always striving for something, trying to be something, making my life look like the story in my head, which basically is just not being here, not being present, not being with what is.
Yeah, for me, that's undeniable. That the only story that really, and it goes to what Angela was saying as well, the only story that really that empowers us is a story that lets us move forward now. And I, really want to celebrate what Amanda was saying about, you become a runner by running, not by having a story about running, but you become a runner by running. And, Anna, you're a surfer. How do I know you're a surfer? because you go surfing. No story involved in that. Simple, this is what I do. It's my favorite Spanish poet or poem, Machado, who says, "Traveler, there is no path. We make the path by walking it." It's so, now what we do, that is the truest story. Everything else contains truth, but is not true.
One other thing that I think drives humankind is that we think we have to be the best at something in order to do it, when you just have to participate, because following your interests really make the world go round. Like if Anna, if you never tried surfing before and now you're trying it, there's a surfing store that benefits from you trying it. There's an instructor that benefits from you trying it. There's a beautiful ocean that has space for you. So I think we need to not worry about being the best, but just participating. That is, and isn't that the essence of life? Isn't that like the mwah, the chef's kiss to like not being the best, but just being a part of it?
What does that do? Is it builds up consistency by doing it, and then you do become the best eventually, and then you can help people that are beginning. Like it's just a beautiful cycle of infinity.
Absolutely.
And we're doing a disservice by not doing it.
Yes.
Yes. I love the thought, Anna, that in 20 years, you will have a 45-year-old or 40-year-old woman, someone on that cusp into what's officially midlife, going, "Oh, I feel I should surf, but I'm not a surfer." And you're going to be at the gnarly sun, and you're going to go, "Nah, come on, we're going down to the beach." and therefore,
I do it now. I mean, to the 20, 30-year-old, something is like, "I'm too old for that." I'm like, girl.
And that's how we become the elder. That's how we become the guide, not by telling a story, but by doing stuff and saying, "If I can do this, come along behind, you do it your way." And so I agree so strongly, Angela, that this is how we make our contribution at every level, socially, emotionally, all of these things. We do it by doing it. So I'm going to wrap this up because Anna's had to disappear already. Unless there's any more thoughts or things to throw in. If not, I'm just seeing. Yes, Anna had another meeting. So.
I was writing down this one sentence that you just said before is, "What we do is the true story." I'm going to try and embrace this.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's a useful one, isn't it? I like that one. It's the first time I said it. So. Sometimes I say things and go, "Oh, that's quite good. I'll write that down." Any other thoughts or inputs from the room? No. Anyone want to sum up anything, Amanda or Gaby or Vreni, Angela? Now, in that case, I will wrap this up. School of Humankind does a first Tuesday talk, first Tuesday of every month. Last Thursday of every month, we do a contemplative session. Sometimes Vreni does a contemplative intuitive drawing session. Sometimes there's a meditation session. Last month, I actually did a movement meditation session, which was really gentle and enjoyable. Almost all of this stuff is available on our School of Humankind YouTube channel. Vreni is waving at me.
Yes, because when you touch on it, I'll do a session on the 15th of April, and it's going to be a drawing session, but it's going to have a theme, and the theme is the perfect mother myth. So we want to look a little bit at the perfect mother, and then we want to dive in and just try and change something about the story we tell ourselves around this.
Brilliant. And that's the 15th of April.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Details for that presumably are on the School of Humankind website, I guess. Yeah. or it will be soon if they're not. That Angela nodding because she goes, yes, it will be soon. We're also just launching the School of Humankind's first paid course, because we do all these free events, a video-based course on using presence to combat anxiety. Go to www.schoolofhumankind.com if you're interested in that. And if you use a code, which I think is SO30HK, for at least the next month, you'll get 30% off the price. So there you go. Thank you, Gaby. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Vreni. Thank you, Angela. And thank you, guests in the room. We will be back on Thursday with another community event. Can you remember what that is, Angela?
That is, we're going to meet Anna, who is, we also thank Anna. We're
Yes.
going to meet the faculty because she's one of our newer faculty members.
And so we will find all about her, nurse, coach, surfer. There we go. Brilliant. I'll wrap this up. Thank you, everybody.